Welcome to 5-Minute Lessons for Nonprofits. I'm Ben Takis, and today we're going to talk about how to keep board meeting minutes. It's very important to remember that your meeting minutes are a formal legal document. They're a key part of a nonprofit organization's corporate records, and these are not just the notes of the meeting. The minutes are one of the first documents that are going to surface in the event of any audit or investigation, so you need to be very careful about what goes into the minutes. Now, before we get started, please note this is just general education. I am an attorney for nonprofit organizations, but I am not your attorney, so if you have questions, please retain legal counsel. What are we going to cover today? We're going to start with some discussion about legal requirements surrounding minutes. We're going to talk about what to include in your meeting minutes, what not to include, and we're going to close on some process considerations. So, legal requirements. State nonprofit corporation law will almost always require that minutes be kept for all meetings, and this typically applies to board meetings as well as meetings of committees with board delegated powers. So your executive committee, audit committee in most cases, less so for advisory committees. There's not a lot of detail about exactly what you have to do with your meeting minutes and what goes into them. There are some exceptions. Federal tax law has some provisions that are relevant. For example, in the area of conflicts of interest, which deal with the excess benefit transaction rules for 501c3 organizations. There are provisions strongly encouraging organizations to note in their meeting minutes that conflict of interest transactions were reviewed by independent members of the board who looked at data of comparability and otherwise did due diligence and approved the specific terms, and you want to reflect all that in your meeting minutes. Otherwise, the rest is generally a matter of best practices and demonstrating that the board was being responsible and meeting its fiduciary duties. So what goes in the minutes? The basics: date and time of meeting, location, who attended, who didn't attend. That's important for establishing whether there was a quorum, and your basic agenda items. Of course, if there's any official decisions taking place in the meeting, that needs to be there. I generally recommend describing the motion, describe who made the motion, who seconded the motion, and whether the motion passed. In addition, documents that are officially voted on, such as amendments to the bylaws, should usually be attached to the minutes. And the rest of it is where it's largely a matter of style. Most of a board meeting is not official decision making. Most of a board meeting or committee meeting is discussion. And here I recommend just including a very short summary of the discussions and presentations at the meeting. So just the basic gist. For example, you can include in your minutes that the board discussed various strategies to increase contributions in the next fiscal year. And that is enough. You don't need to be adding a lot of extra details, but if you do, do so with purpose. To show that the board is satisfying its fiduciary duties and complying with the law. Otherwise, generally you want to stick to a summary. What not to include? The biggest mistake I see is organizations including too much detail, trying to include a record of everything that was said at the meeting. So your word-for-word transcriptions, your offhand candid remarks, what individual board members were saying by name, that you generally want to leave out of the minutes. Of course, if there's any sensitive or confidential information or statements that could be a red flag for legal or ethical violations, you don't want to have those in your minutes. And looking for these items is a key part of that streamlining process where you take your notes and you filter it down into what becomes the minutes. Lastly, some process considerations. So meeting minutes should always be formally approved by the board or the committee if it's a committee meeting, generally no later than the next meeting of that governing body. Once approved, the minutes should be promptly signed by an officer, generally the secretary. This is evidence that the meeting minutes were approved and are official. And further, I really strongly recommend that minutes should be scanned or otherwise kept as an image document in the corporation records for example, a PDF. Wrapping up, remember that meeting minutes are an official corporate document and the primary record of the governing body's decision making, and for this reason, you need to always treat meeting minutes with more formality than you would treat your meeting notes. That should do it for today. Thanks for watching. For more information, please visit the website se4nonprofits.com, and see you next time.